So let's talk about Carl Sagan. But we're not going to talk about the astronomer you think you know, the guy famous for billions and billions of stars. Now, today we're looking at Sagan the strategist, the man who came up with the secret equation, not for the cosmos, but for changing the entire world. It's a story of how wonder became a weapon and how a perspective born from being an outsider came to shape the very conscience of a planet.
Okay, picture this. It's the absolute peak of the Cold War. The entire world is holding its breath. You've got two superpowers with enough nukes to end civilization over and over again, just locked in this terrifying standoff. The air is just thick with fear, kids are doing duck-and-cover drills in school, and the only solution anyone's talking about is building bigger, better bombs, a strategy with the charming name mutually assured destruction. But in the middle of all this madness, Carl Sagan saw something else. He realized the arms race, the politics, the walls, they were all just symptoms of a much deeper problem, a catastrophic failure of perspective.
So, if a better bomb wasn't the answer, then what was? I mean, what could one single astronomer possibly offer that generals and presidents had missed? What could be powerful enough to push back against the threat of total annihilation? Well, the answer wasn't a piece of tech. It wasn't some political treaty. It was an idea, a perspective so profound it could completely change how we see ourselves and our tiny home in the universe. And understanding this, well, it's the key to his entire life's work.
And that brings us to the first piece of his radical strategy. He developed a weapon that you couldn't measure in megatons, a force that nobody in the Pentagon or the Kremlin was even thinking about. He decided to change the rules of the game entirely. He built a weapon called wonder.
You really have to remember what was going on at the time. The world was just sliced up into these opposing camps. All you heard about was the Iron Curtain, proxy wars, this huge ideological battle for the soul of humanity. Everything was focused on what divided us, our borders, our politics, our cultures. And while everyone else was busy digging trenches and pointing missiles at each other, Sagan's approach was to just zoom out. He offered a viewpoint so vast that all those earthly arguments, all those walls we built, would suddenly seem not just small, but completely absurd.
He called this idea planetary citizenship. And the key here is that, for Sagan, this wasn't just some nice, fluffy, poetic idea. He saw it as a systematic exercise. It was a rigorous, disciplined practice, almost like a mental martial art. It was all about intentionally using the cosmic perspective, using that profound, humbling awe you feel looking at the universe as a tool to dissolve our petty tribal fights and remind us that we all share one fragile home adrift in a vast cosmic ocean.
And this right here, this captures the absolute heart of his strategy. He took awe, that spine-tingling feeling you get when you look up at a sky full of stars, and he turned it into a practical tool. He weaponized it, not for destruction, but for creating empathy, understanding, and humility on a global scale. But a worldview this powerful, this radical, it doesn't just pop into existence. It has to be earned. It has to be forged in fire.
Which brings us to where this incredible perspective actually came from. You might think a worldview this grand was born in some prestigious university, a corner office with a great view, surrounded by awards and applause, but the reality is the exact opposite. It was forged in the fires of professional and social exile. So let's rewind for a minute. Forget the famous starship of the imagination from his TV show. Instead, picture a young kid in Brooklyn back in the 1930s. His dad was an immigrant, a fabric cutter, the family didn't have much money, and for a curious kid, the world could feel pretty small. But then he found a portal, the local library. It was there, totally lost in books, that he had a revelation that would define his entire life. Those little lights in the night sky, they weren't just lights. They were suns, just like ours. And they probably had their own planets. They were other worlds. So right from the start, this creates the fundamental tension of his whole life. Intellectually, he was an insider. His mind was already soaring through the cosmos, wrestling with the biggest questions you can imagine. But in the real world, in the social structure of the time, he was an outsider, the son of a working-class immigrant, in a world that was all about pedigree and privilege. And this conflict, this feeling of being on the inside and the outside at the same time, it shaped everything you would ever do.
This timeline really shows how that early tension played out. It all starts with that spark in Brooklyn. He's brilliant, he gets into the best schools, he becomes a young professor at Harvard, he's on the fast track. But then, we hit 1967, the critical turning point. Harvard denies him tenure. And the reason is almost unbelievable today. He was too good at communicating with the public. The academic establishment saw his passion for sharing science as a flaw. He was too popular. In their world, serious scientists stayed in the lab. They didn't go on TV. So he moves to Cornell, and that's when his academic exile really begins.
Back then, in that academic culture, talking to the public was often seen as a sign you weren't a serious researcher.
It was a distraction, not a skill. So when Sagan embraced it, writing articles for magazines and going on talk shows, they slapped the label popularizer on him, which was basically an insult. It meant he had to be that much better, that much more rigorous in his actual scientific work just to get his ideas heard over the noise of their judgment and professional jealousy.
Now, this is a really critical moment. A lot of people in his shoes would have gotten bitter. They might have tried to conform, to play the game, just to win back the approval of the people who rejected them. But Sagan did something different. Instead of looking outward for validation from those institutions, he turned inward. He used that isolation as a space to build his own intellectual framework, an internal fortress built on the undeniable, unshakable logic of the cosmic perspective.
And the result of this exile was something we can call sovereign awe. So what does that mean? It means his sense of wonder became totally independent. It didn't need a diploma from Harvard to be valid. It didn't need a thumbs up from a tenure committee to be real. It was self-reliant. Permanent because it was based on the fundamental truths of the universe, not the shifting opinions of other people. He realized this personal truth was way more powerful than any title they could ever give him. And that became his real shield and his true source of power.
So from this period of academic exile and the development of his sovereign awe, a core philosophy started to emerge. This was the mindset that would fuel his entire public mission. It was like the operating system for his life's work. Let's call it the star stuff mindset.
At the very heart of this mindset is the cosmic perspective. And the most important part of this is the total rejection of intellectual superiority. Sagan understood that the moment you use your knowledge to feel smarter than someone else, you've just built a wall. You've lost the ability to actually connect and communicate. The cosmic perspective isn't about knowing more than other people. It's about realizing our shared ignorance and our shared fragile place in the universe. It's about connection, not hierarchy.
And nothing, I mean nothing, captures this philosophy of connection better than his most famous phrase, "We are star stuff." Just think about that for a second. It's a 100% scientifically accurate statement. The carbon, the nitrogen, the oxygen in our bodies were literally forged in the hearts of stars that died long ago. But it's so much more than a fact. It's poetry. It's a statement of profound belonging. In just 3 words, he completely dismantles that stereotype of the cold, detached scientist. It says, we're not just observers of the universe, we are the universe, come to life and able to wonder at itself.
What makes his mindset so incredibly powerful is this perfect duality. On one hand, you have radical skepticism, the classic scientific discipline to demand evidence, to question every single claim. But he paired this with radical wonder, the emotional courage to just be amazed by reality, to feel that profound awe for what is actually true. It's the perfect synthesis of your head and your heart. See, skepticism without wonder is just cynical and dry, and wonder without skepticism is just naive. You absolutely need both to see the universe for what it really is. And this unique mindset is why, when he finally got his own TV show, Cosmos, he approached it in a completely different way. He didn't see the TV studio as a stage for entertainment or some platform for his own ego. No, he saw it as a laboratory. The cameras, the lights, the scripts, they were all instruments in the most important experiment of his life. Could he take these complex, mind-bending scientific truths, wrap them in a feeling of pure wonder, and transmit that feeling right into people's living rooms? Could wonder be the vehicle for truth? Now, a beautiful philosophy is one thing, but making it real day after day requires practice. And this is where Sagan truly separated himself from other great thinkers. He didn't just have a mindset, he had a system. He developed a rigorous, repeatable process for consistently generating these moments of insight. We can call it his awe-harvesting system.
And the key word here is rigorous. We tend to think of genius as something that just strikes like lightning. For Sagan, it was all about habits. It was about process. He literally designed his life to consistently produce clarity and wonder, day in and day out, whether he felt inspired or not. It was like a machine he built where the input was raw cosmic awe and the output was refined, powerful understanding that he could share with anyone.
One of his cornerstone habits was something we can call the tape recorder protocol. He famously hated sitting at a desk to write. Instead, he would walk, sometimes for miles, dictating his really complex ideas into a simple tape recorder. The genius of this is that speaking an idea out loud forces you to simplify it to find the story inside of it. It bypasses that analytical part of your brain that just gets stuck staring at a blank page. His rule was simple. If you can't say it in a way that flows and makes sense, you don't understand it well enough yet. It was a physical test for intellectual clarity.
So let's look at the whole system working together. Step 1 was dictation, using that tape recorder protocol to turn jumbled thoughts into a clear story.
Step 2 was the skeptic's audit. Once the idea was clear, he'd attack it with his famous baloney detection kit to make sure his own arguments were rock solid. And then step 3 was all about feedback. He would personally answer thousands of letters, especially from children. And this wasn't just him being a nice guy, it was data collection. It told him exactly which ideas were landing and which weren't, so he could constantly fine-tune his message. This entire system created a daily rhythm in his work, a constant return to what he called foundational wonder. You see, awe wasn't something he just hoped to feel when he looked through a telescope. He engineered his days to produce it. He understood that wonder is like a muscle. If you don't exercise it every single day, it gets weak. And it was this disciplined, systematic cultivation of awe that transformed him from an academic outcast into a global force for reason and hope.
And this brings us to the climax of a story. This is the payoff. For all the decades of exile, for forging that sovereign perspective, for sticking to his rigorous daily system, all of it was leading to this. He moved beyond being just an astronomer and became something totally new, an architect of a global consciousness.
I mean, just think about the incredible irony here. The very man who was dismissed by the elites at Harvard for being too popular was now one of the most influential thinkers on the entire planet. Through his show Cosmos, he was shaping how millions of people saw their world, their future, and their place in the universe. The very skill they punished him for, his incredible ability to connect with everyday people, was now the source of his greatest power. He hadn't changed. The world was finally catching up to him.
And no single moment demonstrates this power more than the story of the pale blue dot. This is the ultimate expression of his life's work. It's the moment his entire philosophy got crystallized into a single, breathtaking, world-changing image. It is the peak of his entire journey.
So by 1990, the Voyager 1 spacecraft is way out at the edge of the solar system, about to leave our neighborhood for good. A lot of people at NASA thought it was a waste of time and energy, but Sagan insisted. He pleaded with them to turn the camera around and take one last picture of home. And from nearly 4 billion miles away, Earth was just a tiny speck of light, a pale blue dot hanging in a sunbeam. But it was Sagan's words, his poetic narration about that photo, that transformed it from a technical image into a global mirror for our own humility, forcing all of us to confront our smallness and the absurdity of our endless fights.
And so, we finally arrive at the Sagan Equation. And it's not a mathematical formula. It's a strategic principle. It is this radical, counterintuitive idea that your capacity for wonder, your ability to genuinely feel and share that awe, is not a soft skill. It's not a luxury. It is your most powerful, most effective, even your most lethal professional weapon for making real lasting change in the world.
So what's his ultimate legacy? It's that Carl Sagan, the man in the corduroy blazer talking about billions and billions, completely and forever destroyed the myth that science has to be cold and unfeeling. He proved that the deepest truths of the universe are not just interesting to think about, they are emotionally overwhelming. He showed us that science and soul are not two separate things, and that's where his story stops being just about him and starts being about us.
So how do we actually apply all this? Because Sagan's journey isn't just some fascinating story from the past. It's a blueprint. It's a set of instructions. It's a code for anyone in any field who wants to make a real impact. It is your code for greatness.
If you have ever felt like an outsider in your own field, if you've ever felt that the gatekeepers, the so-called experts, the people in charge just aren't listening or don't value what you bring to the table, then this story is especially for you. Sagan's life is proof of a powerful truth. Your real power doesn't come from their approval. It comes from the unwavering belief in your own unique internal perspective.
The pale blue dot was Sagan's ultimate tool for shifting perspective. It was his way of making something familiar seem strange and new and profound, revealing a deeper truth. So the really important question for all of us is this: how do you find your pale blue dot? How do you find that perspective-shifting insight in your own work, in your own life, that can change everything?
Here's a simple 3-step process you can use based directly on his method. Step 1. Find a routine task. Pick anything you do every day that you've come to see as boring. Making your coffee, writing a daily report, analyzing a spreadsheet. Step 2. Commit to awe. Instead of just going through the motions, interrogate that task. Ask the big questions. Where did this coffee bean actually come from? What massive human network brought it to my kitchen? What is the hidden story behind this data? Look at it with fresh eyes. And step 3, unlock understanding.
Sagan's promise is that if you truly commit to finding the awe in the mundane, you will inevitably unlock a hidden layer of understanding, a new perspective that nobody else has taken the time to see.
This is the final and most important lesson here. Wonder is not a passive feeling that just happens to you. It is an active choice. It is an act of power. When you choose to systematically cultivate your own sense of wonder, to build your own awe-harvesting system, you completely shift your position in the world. You stop being a victim of routine, a victim of other people's opinions. You start becoming the sovereign master of your own perspective.
In the end, Sagan taught us that the answers to our biggest questions aren't just out there in the cosmos. They are also inside of us, in our capacity to feel, to question, and to connect. The truth may be in the stars, but your awe is the code for your greatness.